Thinking Native, 11 Insights for 2011, with your host, Evan Milton.
Ben Wagner, I'm the former CEO of Stonewall and now Chief Marketing Warrior for Native. It's a very elaborate title. In short, it means that I've got to build the Native brand so that it's top of mind for marketers, clients, agency talent, pitch intermediaries, as well as students. So really just getting Native into the forefront and into the spotlight as quickly as possible, due to the fact that it's a new brand and that most people wouldn't be that familiar with it, having not known much about the merger. The other aspect of my role is to make sure that key clients and key relationships are as strong as possible, and doing everything that I can to ensure that those relationships, particularly the client ones, stay as strong as they can with the agency so that we can develop as much opportunity with them as possible.
A bit of a left-of-centre question, but you were once a CEO and everybody knows what that is. Now you're not. You're this chief marketing warrior. How does that feel?
It's actually a good feeling. I get to worry a whole lot more in the true sense, in that we're building a brand that's completely unknown. We're also building a service offering that isn't known to the market either. So the job that goes with that is significant. I haven't done a detailed marketing job like this in quite some time, so I really am relishing the challenge. But I must say that it's a very, very different beast dealing with a 130-man team versus the 40-50-man team that we had at Stonewall. So it is a big challenge, but I really am enjoying it. And I also get to focus on the Cape region rather than a national footprint, which I've had to do before.
Now, I need to give our listeners a little bit of context here in terms of your involvement in digital over the years. You sat on the Exco of the Digital Media and Marketing Association. You're one of the key role players in the Digital Forum, going as far back as the 2000s. You headed up the Digital Jury Panel of the Luries in 2006. You set up the Bookmark Awards. You were involved in getting the Creative Circle to recognize digital and create awards for that. So you're very perfectly placed to answer a question about where the industry is going as a whole. Where do you think the South African industry is headed?
I think we're still in our infancy, really. I've got a young daughter and she's crawling at the moment, and I think the industry is probably not that far off from that analogy. We're quickly being taken a lot more seriously in terms of the work client context. That certainly is starting to grow with the DMMA now pulling in agencies as well as publishers, and that's something that excites me tremendously. And seeing the impetus behind traditional agencies trying to develop digital skill and competency clearly shows that we're on the right trajectory. The reason why I still think we're in our infancy is that the type of work that we've been doing as agencies isn't on par with a global level. You can see that reflected in the international awards, and that for me is a major calling point on why we still need to improve and why this industry needs to improve. And the only way that can happen is for clients to fully understand what digital is about, and that's through education, and also on the job creation side. We need to build skills and we need to build resources, and currently we're really struggling to do that, and that is where tertiary and government work really comes into play in developing our industry even further. So the fact of the matter is we don't have the right skills, we don't have enough skills, we don't have previously disadvantaged skills, and that really just shows on where our industry plays at the moment. We are pulling across a lot of traditional agency staff members. They've clearly seen that digital is very much on the rise, and the smart ones have started to move across to agencies like Native, and we've seen a lot of people already join from traditional agencies. I think the one important distinction between a digital agency owner and a traditional agency owner is that we don't have that networked ownership model yet. Granted, there are a couple of agencies and probably 2 or 3 that are part of major international networks. By and large, you're getting an entrepreneur-minded person who's running the agency and doesn't have that business experience necessarily that the head of Ogilvy does or the head of Draft FCB. And that, I think, is something that will take place over time as we get introduced to larger budgets, more complicated projects, and growing our teams. that does become far more complex, and it does build experience, which we don't necessarily have right now.
So you used the analogy of a crawling toddler to say how the industry is at this point in South Africa. The digital industry is in its infancy. But is there a way that we get to leapfrog, like a human being would have to grow and walk? Is there a way we can start running already?
I think the only thing that will force us to adapt very quickly is demand. That certainly is happening, and you just need to look at the double-digit growth that most agency owners would have experienced over the last 2 years will only tell you that they're adapting very quickly, either by boxing clever, hiring very quickly, building up efficiency and processes, helping clients understand digital more, so that their decision making is far more easier and smoother. Those are the kind of things that I would guess are the things that are helping people adapt really quickly. The demand is definitely there, and it's how to deal with the demand that will see people sink or swim or crawl.
You spoke about growth and how agencies and their skills need to develop. But there's another aspect as well, that is we have about 10% of the South African population on the internet, but only 2% of advertising spend is focused in the digital area. How do we grow that, and how does Native deal with that particular challenge?
I think it's clear that digital agencies need to prove themselves. So they need to firstly deliver results and metrics and show that they can grow share of wallets, they can show increased spend, they can show community development or database affiliation. Those are the demonstrable things or demonstrable things that agencies can take out very quickly. The one thing that they also need to show is that they've got the ability to lead brands, and that's via brand custodianship. So to develop those skills in-house, or find or foster those skills, that's very much a big job that needs to be done, so that it can clearly show that we've got the ability to lead brands via digital channels or the sub-channels. In terms of getting that spend, getting the mixture right, I think there's a job that needs to be done by the media agencies, where they're showing what the relevant expenditure is across all media channels, not just digital, and showing that there's actually a huge shortfall, but also proving the results, so that people start moving their spend. I think that spend is definitely starting to move through. You can certainly see that, just speaking from a Native experience, a lot of our clients are starting to look at double-digit weighting in terms of their expenditure. So 10% and upwards is certainly the figure that we're starting to see, and again, that just points to the amount of workload that is around the corner, or that's actually happening.
Asking you to put on you've spoken about industry, but asking you to put on your Native hat now, what can an agency like Native do to try and get clients to move more of their spend in there? Is it actually something that an agency can get right?
It can, as I said earlier, proving the results I think is important. Spending time with clients, and not just on specific projects, but spending educational or even entertaining time together, looking through campaigns, looking through the latest trends, understanding what worked in a specific case and why it wouldn't work locally, or even looking for those local case examples where things have been proven right or wrong. And it doesn't matter if it's wrong, because then you clearly know what direction not to follow in a specific instance.
You mentioned an interesting part there, which is we have global aspirations, but we need to contextualize things locally. As an industry, how well do you think we're doing that? Do we just want to be doing campaigns that would work in North America or Europe, or are we actually getting to grips with the fact that we have a very different population and bandwidth situation in South Africa?
It's a good point, and it's a natural trap we always seem to fall into, is that we always want to look at what won at Cannes, what won at one show or Webby Awards or wherever that might be, and we sometimes get overwhelmed with the kind of bandwidth factor, because we're looking at a total presentation in a short video clip, and it's always very impressive. So yes, we do fall into that trap. I think what's sometimes hard for us is to do the hard yards on something like mobile, where it is a little bit bitty, it is a little bit technical in nature sometimes, and you've got to go through a whole bunch of processes to cover a wide range of target, as an example. So something like USSD is quite complicated in certain cases, but the detail is there in how you weave that story together, and how you understand the consumer journey, and that actually just involves more planning, more work, and it's not just a pop-out solution that you're going to find in a vending machine for digital marketing.
Your role as the chief marketing warrior sees you having to deal with Joburg markets and Cape Town markets in different kinds of ways. How do they seem to differ as markets, Joburg and Cape Town?
I still see them as the same market. In terms of my role as chief marketing warrior, it's really about how do we get closer to clients that we want to be working with, how do we get closer to clients that we already work with and we want to expand share of wallet or share of services, and that all comes down to having a strategy behind that, and that's something that we've developed around client conferencing, having smaller breakaway sessions, looking at trends, and really just playing the education role, as well as doing great work, because that's going to prove the case as well. In terms of the makeup of the markets, I don't see them as being widely that different. It's not like we're dealing with a completely different populace or anything like that. It's not like we're in Brazil or something unusual like that. I think what we do see is that there's certainly different budget levels, and that does have implications on what you can and can't do. As Native, we're looking for top-end clients, so the budget levels are generally the same. As an example, Native has one of its biggest clients being Distilled down in the Cape, and yes, they do have a Cape footprint, but they do extend nationally, so there isn't really much of a differentiation there at all.
Then there are other regions as well. I remember in the Stonewall days, we looked at potentially even taking over a bit of an agency that was Durban-based. Do you think these markets are really different city-wise, or is the way that you carve up the South African market not really to do with regions, but more to do with languages or demographic groups?
I think for us it's really about digital propensity and usage, so it wouldn't necessarily come down to region. And I know Durban is kind of an anomaly. You've got clients like Unilever and Hewlett's and a couple of others there, but it's not to say that we shouldn't be fishing there, and we certainly have a lot of interest out of that region in terms of what Native is about, and it's just actually a case of finding the clients that stick, but we wouldn't necessarily segment that in terms of how we do client-based work. There it's all about digital usage or propensity, as I mentioned.
In general terms, though, the market and where the money in the industry sits is much more Gauteng focused. I mean, that's just a national fact. But having said that, there are a lot of big agencies in Cape Town. Why do you think that is?
It's been a historical thing, and I'm not sure whether people just want to stay here, whether there's a natural affinity towards the lifestyle or the kind of creative hub that Cape Town has become over time. But if you think back, the initial startup agencies in the digital world were the Electric Oceans, Type 1. There were also some Durban-based ones, funnily enough, that moved here. So Armadillo was originally Durban-based, but then moved here as the precursor to sort of Ogilvy's digital aspirations, and there are probably one or two that I've forgotten now. But there has seemed to be it's always been the kind of starting point, which is really unusual actually, but I guess it's based they generally start as creative shops, and then they broaden out and they grow, and they try and go full service as quickly as possible, or their clients actually demand that they go full service. So that's probably the reason, but it's not really that unusual. You've got hubs like San Francisco in the States, and that's kind of been the common area as well, where you get that sort of incubator mentality. You've either got a very strong design community or tech community, and you find that actually fosters a sort of stable of agencies or companies. However, most of the Cape-based agencies now have got a Johannesburg office or office presence of some kind. You can see Glue have certainly grown their offering extensively up there. Quirk have done the same. Hello Computer just opened up a satellite office up there. So all the main players are in the process of doing that, or have already done so. So I do see that as a trend that will continue.
I want to pick up on something you said there about shops starting out, certainly in the digital sphere, as creative shops, and then moving into a bit more production and eventually trying to get towards full service. And in certain respects, that's one of the things that drives what Native is about. Why do you think that's grown, and do you think Native can crack it?
I think the reason why it's grown, and particularly from a Native perspective, is when you start your digital agency the same way that we did with Stonewall, we found that the less that's out of your control, the fewer things that can go wrong. So in the instance of media planning and buying, you want your creative working with your media planner. Otherwise, you're going to have a disconnect in the way that strategically you're going to look at a piece of work. There could be inefficiencies in terms of timing, the agility to switch creative or switch the media planning environment around. So those are things where, if you're a full service agency, you've got far better control, and of course there's a commercial reason behind it. You're wanting to retain as much of the share of budget, particularly the digital budget, as you can, and I think it also allows you to have a far stronger strategic relationship with the client when you're working at a very specific level rather than just on a production orientated relationship.
At an industry level, Native has certainly responded to that by creating and forming a full service agency. But we know that traditional agencies are trying to tool up their digital offering, and I'm sure there are other digital agencies that are trying to get more towards full service. What do you think sets Native apart in terms of that in the industry?
It's a very good question, and it's a danger that I see a lot of the agencies possibly falling into this trap. The traditional agencies are smart. They're not dumb. They clearly have been and are gearing up for digital in a big way. The trick for them is to own the client relationship, and they've done that for decades and decades, and that's not going to end. So what they're clearly doing is they're bringing in digital thinkers and doing all the execution via production companies the same way they did with television commercials. So for Native, we certainly don't want to fall into that grouping of being a production-based organization. We certainly want to own the client relationship from a digital perspective at the outset, and then grow that as much as we can into brand custodianship, etc. So for us, it's clearly very important that we own the strategic relationship with clients right up front. Let that transcend into whatever outcome or production-based elements that there might be, but it's very, very important that we sit at the lead table.
You mentioned that the industry as a whole, from a digital side, is moving more into full service. It needs to own the strategic relationship with client, and Native has certainly got some successes in that regard. But how do you think clients feel about that? Are they up for being led by a digital agency?
It's a natural tension that's existed. There's been this term, the great race between traditional and digital agencies. Clients will quickly make up their minds or make their decisions once they see who delivers the results. I've seen some very clumsy examples of ad agencies coming up with digital ideas, and you can literally see that the execution falls flat. It delivers zero results, and we see that in time to time from the judging expertise that we've got, or the experience that we've got, where we see work that they feel is award worthy, and you can see that it's completely flawed from even the strategic side, and then that just covers all the way through into execution. So clients will quickly pick that up. They'll know when their money's been wasted, and it's really up to the digital agency, be it Native or anybody else, actually, to stand up and make a brave case for why they believe that particular strategy is warranted, why it'll work and why it'll deliver, and then make damn sure that the production part of it and the execution actually fulfills that promise that you've made.
We've spoken about the industry growing into being full service and the client willingness to potentially go there as long as results can be proved. But what about the other part of that mix, which is media agents actually booking in that space, and how that's going to work? Do you think that they're open to doing that, being digital?
I think the whole notion of a results-orientated media agency that gets paid on results isn't that far away. The entire recessionary period, which isn't really over yet, it certainly looks like we're not out of the woods yet, is leading to that kind of thinking. The problem that media agencies face, and this is across digital and traditional, is that your margins are shrinking around the commission. So the only way that there's a counter to that is if you start being paid on outcomes and you start putting your entire commission or portion thereof on risk. I'm not entirely sure how far that thinking has progressed. Certainly from our perspective, we're happy to look at it on a case-by-case basis, because we've also there's a whole bunch of variables that go into that sort of makeup. Whether the product will sell, what is the support marketing like on a through-the-line level. So there's a whole bunch of complicated variants that need to be taken into consideration before you even go down that road. But certainly on a traditional media buying level, that's something that I believe has been tried and has been adopted to a certain extent, because the days of 16.5% commission are certainly over, and that's without a doubt.
The final component of understanding where the industry is growing and understanding how native fits into the digital space is to consider where the clients fit in. So previously a client would have come up with a campaign or a message, a set of objectives, and understood it in a traditional advertising way and executed something, purchased the media space and put it out there. We're saying that this needs to be viewed in a very different way, and Native provides a different way of dealing with those kind of client objectives. But the question is, are clients buying this? Are they getting into what the digital headspace needs to be?
I think it depends firstly on the level of client expertise that you're dealing with. Traditionally, we found that it's very, very safe for clients to go through their regular campaign cycles, be it a season or some kind of time-based element that leads them into that kind of thinking. The trick is really to change their perception of campaign cycles and to actually show what a huge amount of waste they generally end up spending, and trying to re-engineer their thinking into something there where we can offer some kind of platform, whether it's entertainment-based, utility-based, community-orientated, some kind of platform that leverages different elements to create a practical case on why you should be creating and putting something out in the market. I think too often clients just want to make a sexy commercial, let it extend into 360 thinking, and I think the whole notion of platform is that you're actually going into 365-day thinking, and that's really the key that from a native perspective we want to make that difference, and that's actually very hard to change, but through time spent with clients, proving the case, showing the results, demonstrating innovation, and actually finding the essence of what that utility or what that platform could be, that's actually the key. And you can only do that when you've got trust from a client, and that only happens at the upper reaches of a strong relationship.
In terms of the industry, what other kinds of trends do you see us needing to take into account for 2011?
Cool. I love this question because I normally don't know the answer, and what I typically do is use the marketer's random sample of one, being myself. And I think the thing that I've seen, particularly around social media, is that everybody's got Facebook fatigue. It just seems like what's happened is that we're now friends with everybody. Most of the people we don't really know. We get a huge amount of garbage, shoved down our wall every day. If I go on there, I generally just find the whole scenario quite bleak. I'm actually more interested in Twitter, just in terms of the richness of the content that I get, and that also depends on who I'm following. But from a Facebook point of view, or a general social networking perspective, I think what's going to happen is that you're just going to start getting niche subsets or niche environments happening within broader social media channels, and that's where brands will find interest, when they can actually start creating hubs that are very specific. I guess it is really the fragmenting of social media, the same way that it's happened with TV, and you just get a multitude of channels, and that's just going to rise up to an even more fragmented audience, which will make the marketer's job even harder.
You spoke about two very interesting things there in terms of what digital marketers have to worry about and what clients worry about when they deal with our industry. And that is niches and fragmentations on the one hand, and new things that might spring up. The unique Facebook that is just for surfers or for people who love a certain kind of car, or the new version of Twitter, or whatever that case might be. How do we as an industry prepare for these unknowns and make clients feel comfortable about the fact that we know what we're talking about as technology develops, communities change, social media does whatever it's going to do?
I think the key is to firstly have the strongest relationship with your clients, where together you solve those problems, where you're part of the relationship, or the role that you play within in the relationship is to really gather the information work through the trends with your clients, and then discern what are you going to act on, what are you going to leverage, and really, play that part in the relationship. And it is a two-way, street. And I think that's the part that agencies aren't doing. They're so geared up around production that they're not thinking through what are the trends, what are the impact of those trends, and how do we foster a deeper relationship with our clients in interpreting those and giving value back on what that actually means on how we're going to tackle a specific trend.
Do you think that Native offers something particularly valuable to the industry in terms of that, in terms of being able to predict where these things are going, have that relationship, and hopefully guide the clients into what they need in terms of achieving their objectives?
Well, in terms of the insights and strategy department, it's certainly the role within the organization that we get led by the individuals within those departments, and it's also a role that Native is going to be playing within the industry, is that we've got very strong personalities within media, within judging, within the award shows, and then even within the technical and the design fields, is to start leading the industry and showcasing, where should the industry head next? What should we be adopting? And what are also the commercial ramifications in terms of what we adopt and what we don't adopt?
You've alluded to two quite interesting components there, and hopefully you can answer these without revealing any business secrets. But you've spoken here about a role that Native needs to play within the industry, which has to do with education as far as clients go. You also spoke a bit earlier about the need for skills development, even that being at a governmental or institutional kind of level. Any clues you can give us as to what's in the mix there, or is that all behind the wraps?
I think the role that I play on a DMMA level, and all of these things influence Native and the rest of the agency community. The first really important task that I've set myself is to get agencies to grow up around pitches, and that means educating clients and adopting the same guidelines that the ACA uses with traditional agencies. So you're not going to find an environment where a client goes out to pitch, selects 30 agencies, gets them all to do creative and strategy work, and doesn't pay a pitch fee. So we're certainly looking at adopting those guidelines, getting the DMMA membership, of which there's 50 agencies already part of the DMMA, to firstly sign up for those guidelines and to start policing it as best we can, that the pitch process firstly gives a lot more value back to the agency, and it doesn't become just a win-win for client and not for the agency, and to make the whole process a lot more transparent and fairer at the same time. So that's one thing where the agency world needs to grow up, and certainly where we can help the industry benefit at large. From an education point of view, there's certainly, if we are to follow the ACA charter that's being gazetted apparently next year by government, that brings with it a whole raft of firstly opportunities as well as guidelines as to how we need to be governing agencies from an employment equity standpoint, BEE scorecards, all those kind of elements, which will either ramp up efforts to drive initiatives around education or tertiary institutions, or also how government involvement actually plays a role. So those are elements that sound quite broad because we haven't worked through them yet and we don't fully understand what's involved with that, but those are certainly the key kind of tenets of what we want to tackle next year.
So within what you've said is happening at a DMA level and within the industry and within what Native's broader goals are, what does that mean in terms of Native actually on the ground, bringing in work, growing as a business, achieving all of these kinds of things that you've spoken about, being a wiser and more mature business?
Sure. I think the Native marketing aspirations and the aspirations in a broad sense is that we need to win business, and we do that by winning pitches. So myself and Kevin, who's the Chief Growth Officer, we've got a huge role in firstly understanding what pitches are out there, getting on the respective pitch lists, and making sure we do our utmost to win those by being the best presentation team that there are, and being the pitchers. That's really what it's all about. So we've done very well in the short space of time that we've been operating. We've won the IMC, which is a huge piece of work together with Publicis, as well as winning some smaller pieces of work like VC Magazine, where there's a huge creative opportunity with that piece of work. And then we've also won some other work with Fashini and with the Fashini Group, and there we're looking to expand that relationship as much as possible, and also just showcase the skill and the and reward that trust that they've given in appointing us in the first place. So for us, the pitch road is a long one, and we're very confident that we're going to be doing very, very well on that road.
If the South African digital industry is characterized as an infant that is just learning to walk, Native, we've already seen, is kind of hitting the ground running, probably doing some combat roles along the way. But if the SA industry is an infant learning to walk, what's Native?
I think Native is also learning to walk. The reason why I say that is that we're a merged entity, so we've got some teething problems, again referring to infants, I guess. So we've got some teething to do. We've got to learn the layout of the house or the playground. We've got to learn who our friends are. We've got to learn to work with them. And we've also got to, park our egos, park what we've known in the past, and look at the future. And I think that's the absolute key in making the merged entity a success. It's not a finished article by any stretch, and I don't think it ever will be. Otherwise, I don't think you ever get that kind of business. So the starting point is now, and we've got a lot of work to do. We've already done a lot of work, and the heartening part is how easily we've got through the difficult areas, and we're already a single-minded, single-focused organization. So that gives me a lot of confidence.
Ben, thank you so much for your time, both in terms of the insight it gives us into the South African digital industry in 2011 and a better understanding of what Native is and your role in that. In closing, any last thoughts about Native or the industry or anything else?
It's probably going to sound rich coming from me, but I just wish people would unplug more and spend more real people time, or put your feet in the dirt or the sand or whatever it is you do, but just get the fuck out of the digital stuff every now and again, and go but analog, or spend some time with your mom or someone,
and then you can tweet about it.
Well, just don't even do that, but just go surfing, do something.
Ben, thank you so much, and all strength to Native, and let's see what happens in 2011.
Thinking Native is a part of the making of Native, a 4-month journey into the making of South Africa's newest full-service agency. For more insights with Native's leading thinkers, visit us on www.native.co today or follow us on @NativeSpeak.